Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm JJ Atkins, this is JJ Atkins Art, and I'm really excited here to bring to you my newest piece called WandaVision. This is a Marvel Phase 4 caricature, if you like that title a little bit better. Small little warning here, there are some kind of minor spoilers ahead based off this TV show. We'll talk about that a little bit later. For now, let's get into discussing the caricature. So right off the bat here, I'd like to just kind of address the fact that there is a more challenging aspect to this caricature when you're doing two figures you're trying to frame into your composition at the same time. It's not all that unusual, though. If you take a look at caricatures done typically at theme parks and stuff like that, it's not unusual for couples to sit together and kind of get that dual caricature going on. So this wasn't exactly outside the realm of something that's been done in the past. But it is something of a challenge for me because I never really had that experience doing those theme park caricatures. This is something I'm just kind of teaching myself a little bit at a time. So let's talk about the exaggeration aspects of our caricatures. First thing, right off the bat, I think anybody can tell that the heads are really large considering the proportion to the bodies that they're sitting on top of. Not exactly unusual. I tend to try not to exaggerate too much, but since I'm trying to go for a resemblance and I want focus on the faces, it just makes sense to make them as larger than life, so to speak. Now, I'm going to focus my attention here briefly on Elizabeth Olsen, the Wanda caricature. When we take a look at her face, hers is not all that unusual from a lot of females, or at least a lot of female celebrities that caricatures tend to be drawn based on. She has very specific features that are very pretty, and again, not all that atypical for Hollywood celebrities. So when we speak to her face, what we can kind of speak to is this idea of a very square jawline, and also something that's rather petite when compared to the upper portions of her head. So you can see that her cranium is a little bit larger than her jaw and chin line. And I've tried to take a little bit of an attempt to enhance her cheekbones because I really felt like they did kind of stand out a little bit. One of the other things that just tends to go with females quite a bit is the enlarged eyes. They tend to express more emotion, makeup helps enhance them, so they draw attention, and it's almost prerequisite to do that in caricature as well, since whatever your eye is drawn to is something that you definitely want to take a look at exaggerating in your caricature studies. Now, Vision, on the other hand, a little bit different. Paul Bettany is the name of the actor that plays Vision, and he looks very, very different in real life than he does with all this cosmetic costume makeup on. There's a lot going on here with him, not only from a makeup standpoint, but also from a CGI standpoint. So if I could speak just to the TV series, and at least the special effects of the TV series and the movies for just a second, I'm not sure, if anybody's aware of this, but I did a little bit of research, and it turns out that the actor Paul Bettany would sit in a makeup chair for several hours to get makeup applied to get this look. But they also, or at least the producers, wanted some sort of a very biomechanical look about him as well. So not only did they do the special effects makeup in a practical way, when Paul Bettany filmed his scenes, they would later go back with CGI and touch it up and basically remove some of the more human elements like pores from the skin and stuff like that. So he has a very, very flat, almost textureless look to his face, other than the lines that are kind of carved into the makeup to kind of represent that more mechanical aspect of his anatomy. So that's what I'm focusing on in my caricature as well. Paul Bettany is typically a skinnier guy, so I try to enhance that not only in face but in body. But when it came to really paying attention to his face, what I try to do more than anything else is make sure that I captured the kind of the flat look to his skin, but also all those tiny, delicate, little intricate lines that represent the mechanics of his android nature. So you can see a lot of them are going in now in that ink phase, and I think it really kind of lends itself quite a bit to trying to capture the resemblance that I'm going for. To be clear, I'm not really going for a caricature of Paul Bettany. Paul Bettany doesn't really look like the Vision with all the makeup and the CGI done. So what I'm really doing is a caricature of the character, the Vision. And, the same could really be said for Elizabeth Olsen as well. Elizabeth Olsen doesn't wear a lot of costume makeup, so to speak. She wears beauty makeup, certainly. But when we look at this particular drawing and this particular inspiration for the drawing, we're taking it from a very specific episode of the TV series that was, for lack of a better term, set in the 70s. And again, small little spoiler there. If you haven't seen this series yet, I'm going to start talking about some spoilers in the series. Minor ones, nothing major. But to get back to the point here, Elizabeth Olsen in this particular costume was meant to invoke some feeling of the 70s era in America, and so she had the longer hair, not typical of the costumes that we would see her in say, like the Marvel movies like Age of Ultron or something like that. her outfit, her dress, and as a matter of fact, Vision's outfit as well, is something that's inspired by the episode of the TV show that was set in the 70s. So let's go ahead and get into the spoilers here a little bit. This TV series is obviously, if you're not aware, on the Disney Plus streaming service. I do have a subscription to the service. I think it's fantastic. I would recommend it to anyone that's a fan of the Marvel movies, and this WandaVision series has really just kind of captured my imagination. And I'll kind of speak to a personal thing on this. When it comes down to it, I think this pandemic has just been a really horrible thing for at-home viewing. People are stuck indoors, they're trying to quarantine, I'm certainly amongst them. And when I sit down in front of the TV, I find that I'm doing that more and more often because I don't have that ability to go out, and I'm getting really bored with TV. I'm just not finding a lot of interesting content or new content that's really kind of capturing my imagination, other than just watching a whole bunch of stuff I've seen a dozen times before. So WandaVision was a really just a magnificent thing to kind of come up at just a really opportune time to create some new content, put it out there, but make it really fascinating content too. There's a lot of originality in this series and a lot of things that really just kind of struck me as just really clever ways to kind of get into this phase 4 of what's going to ultimately be the Marvel Cinematic Universe next generation, so to speak. This is our liaison into it. And again, to speak to the spoiler aspect of this a little bit, one of the great things about the series is that it does have some homage to TV shows of the past. So the first episode is roughly set in the 50s, and it has a very I Love Lucy, Dick Van Dyke type feel to it. And to be honest, I actually debated doing that caricature instead of this one. This is a couple of episodes later where the episode is set in the 70s and it has very much a Brady Bunch type feel to it. And if I can speak a little bit to just a little bit more about capturing the resemblance here, I gotta tell you, I struggled with painting in her dress. All those striped colors and the stripes that were drawn in the inking phase were just a really time-consuming effort. So I did my best to try to speed that up to not bore you with kind of seeing those colors go in so slowly, but the video only speeds up so much, so I hope it wasn't too boring and you didn't skip ahead too much. Now, having said that, I will let you know that we are getting towards the end phase of the coloring portion here. You can see that I have a palette up in the upper left-hand corner that I use to capture my shadows and my light layers that you can see getting painted in right now. I'm not going to spend a lot of time discussing the method on this or how or why it works. This is something I've covered extensively in previous videos. As a matter of fact, I'll put a little card up in the upper right-hand corner for suggestion on one of those videos if you want to go check it out. But what I will say is that if you do manage to stick around to the end here, no skipping ahead, but if you do manage to get to the end here, I do have a little surprise here. Again, it's something of a little bit of a spoiler. But when I got to the end phase of this composition, I decided to do a little bit of a trick here to kind of throw one last little element in here, a punchline, if you will. So again, stick around to the end, and we'll talk about it when we get there. Now, I will say this in terms of the rendering of the shadow and light. This was a particular challenge when it came to the Vision figure, and it's mostly because of his skin tone. He's very purplish red, and trying to make sure that I had shadows and lights that kind of, for lack of a better term, made sense, that looked visually stimulating and not just kind of muddy, was something that really kind of messed with me a little bit. I think I went back and forth on a couple different colors, a couple different opacities of colors, but ultimately settled on something that I think works, especially from the light aspect. And if you notice here, the light on this figure here, on the Vision figure, is kind of coming in from the right-hand side and covering a good portion of the right-hand side of his face. But the light source on Wanda is going to be a little bit different. She's facing in a different direction, so the light source is going to kind of cover the center of her face. Now, what I'm doing right now is I'm painting in some red to kind of just invoke some of the blood underneath her flesh, but it is a little bit bold. I'm going to back that off in terms of opacity a little bit later. But it is a little trick I recommend for anybody that's trying to render flesh tones, is to not forget about just a small, barely visible layer of red in areas around the face like the cheeks and the nose where the blood comes very close to the surface. Just about any shade of skin should get that layer of red, whether you're very, very pale and Caucasian to, even dark, skin, dark-toned African-American in some aspects, can still see some of that red shade in there. Again, where the blood kind of comes close to the surface, cheeks and nose. Now, having said that, everybody's different. Your mileage may vary. If you're going off a photograph to try to capture a resemblance, look for the red, and if it's not there, by all means, skip it over. Now, this is our end piece here, a final composition, but as I said before, there's a little bit of a punchline, so to speak, coming. So let me kind of show you that really quick. Not quite being satisfied with this, I decided to also include a version that had the Dead Vision face. Again, a little bit of a spoiler. This does come up in the series. It's pretty shocking, and I couldn't help but add it in at the last second. So I hope you enjoyed what we got there. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And I know, as always, don't forget to like, to subscribe, and to share. Come on back soon. I'll have more content coming. See you next time.